Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau, with co-hosts Michael, Dean, and Joseph Haytas, who is the author of 36 Strategies of Suitability. We've been going through his book over the last year, give or take. Today we're on strategy 36. And in a minute, I will turn that over to Joe to describe that chapter and why he included that chapter. But also I have another client who might be wanting to join us, and we'll be creating quite a roundtable. Another fantastic client, amazing client. He's really sharing a lot of his journey with me right now, as Michael did when he first got out, his first new car, his first new job, things like that. He's really excited. He sends me videos from the beach. Last night he sent me a video from the basketball court of some game. I'm sorry, I don't know the basketball teams. I'm sure that's a sin in someone's world, but he's having the time of his life, and he's just wanting to secure employment before he gets committed to the podcast. But it would be really great if we do decide to start at the beginning with the book to really bring in his perspective, because I do believe too he was denied once. I don't remember. They all blend together, but anyway, I think he's just a really another wonderful client I would love to have on the show. So, Joe, strategy 36 is get out and stay out. I get the gist of the chapter just from the title, get out and stay out. Why don't I start with you as to just an overview of the chapter and why you included it? And then let's turn it over to Michael and Dean for their perspectives.
Sure. Well, obviously, you want to get out and you don't want to come back and be in the loop of having a rescission hearing or a subsequent reconsideration hearing every year. That's not good, and that defeats everything you've worked for. Plus, it must be very humiliating to come back. I've seen that where they messed up. But that's why it's so difficult to get out, because they want to make sure that you're good to go. And so that's why the commissioners, it's so tough. You're like a salmon swimming upstream. And so once you reach that pinnacle, it should be permanent. And if it's permanent, then you're going to hopefully merge in as seamlessly as possible into the population and live a civilized life. Whatever you did wrong in the past is always going to be there with you. But hopefully you can move on, and you've forgiven yourself, hopefully, and you've prepared yourself as best as possible for the free community. Now, doing that from prison, there's always, it's just a start when you get out there, but from where you were, you hopefully prepared yourself as best as possible. And not only practical things and things, mindful things, emotional things with your relapse plans. Hopefully they're second nature, and they should be, because the commissioners will make sure of that before they give you a grant. So you get out, and of course, the first thing to do is, hey guys, it's 48 hours, right, before you got to see your parole agent. Is that correct? I don't want to be off there. I think it is. Okay. So before you do that, maybe you want to do something like, go visit the grave of a loved one who died while you were in prison, or go have that favorite meal, or go to the ocean. And you might meet some stressors. I talked to some guy who I represented, and he was doing a subsequent reconsideration hearing because he got violated, but it wasn't for this incident. But he said that when he first went out, and this is a true story, he went to Santa Monica Bay, and he was the beach. I'm sorry, Santa Monica Beach, and he was just walking around at sunset, and a chick came up to him wearing a bikini and offered him a joint, to smoke. So that was not good. But he said, he told me, he related to me that he said, "Hey, I'm a human being. I've been down for 31 years. And what do you expect?" But see, he got violated. Not for that, but eventually things came up to him because he wasn't completely changed, and he came back. And so that's not good. You can't do stuff like that. And I'm glad none of you guys are smiling, because I'm kind of sitting back watching all this. I wasn't there, but just telling him, I had a word's eye. I could picture it. Anyways, so go do that thing. Go have that meal. If your mom's still alive, God bless her, and meet with her and your loved ones, and then go to your parole agent, and then go to your transitional house, and do the right thing. And the right thing is continued programming, start that job, or if you don't have a job, go to the referral, and of course meet with your parole agent, and be aware of your resources, be aware of your relapse prevention plans. Just be self-aware. And it may be at first you're a little hesitant to even go out the front door, because you've been conditioned for so long to just go to your cell, or where your dorm, wherever you live. And it's going to take a while getting used to, I'm sure. I know if I put myself in your shoes, that's how I would feel. So, but follow, I know this is not rocket science, but you got to follow the rules, and be the better person, be a good person, and don't go back to the stuff that you were doing before. Obviously, see, that's another obvious thing. And use common sense. And if you use common sense, and you just try to merge in and with the civil society, and you're going to be okay. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, whether it's food, clothing, shelter, financial, emotional. You have your support group in place, and hopefully you can go to them, and you have your go-to person you can go to, and you're going to really be self-aware and obey all the rules. And I'm sure the parole agent will also tell you, the rules when you in the first meeting, what you're expected to do, how often to meet with him or her, and take it from there. And that's my 2 cents. And is anybody out there listening to me? Do you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the button. Michael, let's. I would really like your perspective on the staying out aspect of it, and how you navigate those waters for yourself, to be, and obviously just continually mindful of the risk that there is for the parole violation, and how your strategies for that, and how you think about that sort of thing.
Well, from the very first day I got out, one of the first things we did is go to this massive shopping center, Macy's. And, I got really overwhelmed. And life is going to have the opportunity to do that to us when we get out. And it's how we deal with that. That's going to be the first thing that determines how we program out here. And I use that term because, those of us who've done any serious stretch of time, we've spent our life programming to get out. Well, we're going to be doing the same thing out here. We're going to be programming. So when a lifer is granted parole, we have to provide options for transitional housing. And if we don't have them, the board will help us find them. All right. But as a lifer, we will do a minimum of 6 months in a transitional house. That's just the way it is. They want us to slowly integrate into society. And I tell you what, it has been a really good thing. You know, had I gone out and tried to get a place on my own and all that stuff, it would have been incredibly difficult. So it has eased the transition greatly. It's allowed me to save money. It's allowed me to buy a car. It's allowed me to do a lot of things with my life. But it's also allowed me to focus on some of the things I need to focus on within myself, making this transition. Because, let's see, what's today, the 15th? 3 days ago was my 1-year anniversary. So, yeah. So, the first year, there were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of new triggers that I had to discover the hard way just by coming across them. I mean, I went the very next day. I didn't wait 48 hours to go see my parole agent. My cousin drove me out to LA from Lancaster, where I spent the night with my family. Then we went out to the parole office, dealt with all that. And the first thing they're going to do is go through conditions of parole. It's going to give you, again, just like what the board tells you on a denial, this is what we would like you to do. Well, they'll give you that roadmap. We want you to do this because if you don't, we are going to violate you. For me, I have very few special conditions of parole. Mine is not to go into any establishment whose primary function is gambling. So, with casinos in Los Angeles area and card rooms and stuff, I don't go to those. I give those a wide berth. It's like there's times I have to go to Gardena, and Gardena has several large casinos in it. Well, I give them a wide berth, unless I absolutely have to. I don't even go near the same street they're on, just to maintain and eliminate the triggers and temptations that come with that. And talking about, discovering new triggers. So the first time that I actually got to drive out here, I'm driving down the freeway and I come across this billboard. One half of it is the Mega Millions. The other half of it is Powerball. And then, it's got the big red numbers of the jackpot amounts in it and all that stuff. And then driving down a little further on the freeway, there's, the Commerce Club, this club, that club, the other club, slot machine tournaments, poker tournaments, all this stuff. These signs are everywhere. I've had to learn how to deal with them. And it's just one of the challenges we're going to have to face out here. Now, how did I deal with them? Well, when you are in a transitional house that is funded by STOP, you have to go to 2 outpatient meetings a week in a one-on-one session with a counselor once a week. All right. That's part of the STOP funding requirement. It lets us continue on with our rehabilitative programming, focus on our addiction, and actually have somebody on a therapeutic level to talk to help guide us through some of the stuff that we're finding that are new triggers. And that has been an absolute godsend. I just moved to a new transitional house because my STOP funding ended. This one, I pay part of the rent. Medi-Cal pays the rest. So I'm making that transition into being more independent living. Even though it is a transitional house, it's got less restrictive rules and regulations, and I'm actually paying part of my room and all of my food and stuff. So, I'm learning a little more of that responsibility as I go. And I didn't realize how expensive things are out here, which can be another trigger. So how do I deal with that? Well, on top of the hours I work with my job, I'm looking for another part-time job in the evenings just to supplement, let me save more money and do the things I need to do. It's being, citizen-minded is what I like to call it. Coming out here, being average Joe citizen, going to work, living by the rules, just trying to be a decent person. It's really not that hard, but it's one of the hardest things that we're going to face as former lifers. I mean, before we came to prison, I know I was really bad about this. I had a really bad criminal past that I really didn't like to admit to. I was not above stealing from family and to get money to gamble with. It's what it is. It was my past. And just because I've changed those behaviors into something positive doesn't mean that root behavior is still not ingrained deep down inside. We can change a behavior, we just can never get rid of it. It'll still be there. The root will be there. And if we, ignore it just long enough, it'll take hold and start growing again. It's like taking antibiotics for an infection. If you stop taking your antibiotics, guess what? The infection comes back. It's the same thing with behaviors. If we stop practicing our positive behaviors, those old behaviors will start seeping in. Those criminal thoughts, even though, and I'll be the first to admit, there are times criminal thoughts just pop into my head. But through all of my rehabilitative practices and recovery, I can identify them right when they do and divert them into something more positive. But when we stop being aware of these things, that's when they start taking root. And, for me, it's been constant work. It's, sometimes hard. But you know what? At the end of the day, when I take a look at everything I've done that day, it's like, man, it was a piece of cake. But it all comes down, first off, to our mindset. Am I actually here to live life, be successful, and get off parole and just, live the rest of my life? Or am I just out here bullshitting? And, I think that's one of the big difference I've noticed between a lot of guys who get out by having to go to the board and do all the work and the guys that get out because they got resentenced. Most of the guys that I know that have gotten resentenced, they finish doing what they've got to do in the short period of time they have to do it. And then they're going back. Some of them I know that have served 20 plus years, have already gone back to their old neighborhoods or hanging out with the wrong people. One of them's already been arrested. Being a lifer that had to go to board gave me a valuable perspective on what it means to live out here. Because now that I'm out here, the last thing I want to do is go and screw this up. I don't want to have to put together another board packet for another parole consideration because I got violated because of something that I chose to do. And your terms and conditions of parole are straightforward. Some people, oh, well, that's not fair. I can't go back to my old neighborhood where my family is and that. And that. Well, guess what? If your family really loves you, they will work around that. And, you'll still be able to get to see your family. And, I was fortunate I didn't burn all my bridges. Some people have. And the only way they're going to see their family is if they trudge into their old neighborhood. But if that's a condition of your parole, and I know several guys who can't go to certain parts of Los Angeles because of parole conditions. We have to follow our conditions. You're going to sit down with your parole agent when you first get out and go to report, and he's going to go over them line by line. Do you understand? Is everything clear? Do you have any questions? There is no room for misinterpretation here, because the agent is going to sit down with you and make everything crystal clear. This is what I will violate you for if you do this, period. And, some of them try to be a little less menacing when they say it. But you know what? I think sometimes the menace needs to be there when it's getting this point across. These are rules you do not violate, because they will send you back to prison. I would rather hear that than, well, I suggest you don't do this because it's in your parole. No, I don't want to hear that shit. I want you to be straightforward with me and say, hey, this is going to send you back to prison. I have a great parole agent. My original parole agent just took over as my parole agent again. So it's cool. We have a good relationship. But the man is always straightforward. He pulls no punches. And for me, it works great because I never have any question of what's expected. And that makes my life a whole lot easier. And that gets to the other point. So many times I hear my parole agent's out to get me. My parole agent's an ass. I can't stand the, you know what? We're all on the same team here. Believe it or not, they're law enforcement. We're parolees. We're on the same damn team. We're trying to get us from point A, getting out of prison, to point B, getting off of parole. I've talked to several agents that weren't even my agent, and it's all the same consensus. If you fail, we fail. There was, in talking to some of these agents, the stuff we're doing now in the parole offices, they weren't doing 5, 6, 7 years ago. PAC meetings, helping us find resources, jobs, clothing, medical care, food, college. These PAC meetings when we first get out of prison are so valuable. I go to them every month now, presenting resources. I'm not even going as a parolee anymore. I'm going as a resource provider, which is really cool. Lifer meetings. Again, that's an evening a month that, after the first one, they're not mandatory. But it's one of those things, go to every one of them, because every one of them is like a support group of lifers. We're all there. We're sharing information, sharing resources, along with the parole agents, the parole supervisors, and the parole associates. If you don't know what a parole associate is, it is a person that works for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation in the parole office. Their job is to help us find resources through the parole office. They're not officers, they're associates. They're there to help us navigate. All these resources are there. They weren't there 5, 10 years ago. And, again, it's the guys that I see that are having trouble and that are getting warnings from their parole agents, and some of them getting violated. It's because they're not working within the system. They're not working with their parole agent. They're not working with just the normal confines of society. They're not following their parole restrictions. We've got to do these things. And it's not that hard. It really isn't. Because my conditions of parole, as unrestrictive as they are, it's already things that I don't see that I want to do. Why, knowing where gambling takes me, why the hell would I want to walk into a casino in the first place? So, with our mindsets, it influences a lot of the things we do in life. If we approach this with a positive, pro-social mindset, the mindset of a citizen, the mindset of somebody who wants to be successful just in life in general, we have to approach it like that. But we have a unique advantage, one that a lot of people in society don't have. We've been given a chance to spend years working on ourselves, becoming the best versions of ourselves we can. We've had so much self-help, so much therapy, some of us, that, we're probably some of the most stable members of society once we get out here and figure it out, because we've done the work that a lot of people here in society never get to do. They never get to experience that because life happens. They're out there, they're trying to work 2 jobs to pay the bills, put food on the table, make sure their kids have clothing, and they don't know how to deal with all the stressors that we've learned to deal with. Let's use that advantage to live our lives the best way. And you know what? We can be an example, not just for other parolees, but also for some of the people we know in our lives that are going through it. All it takes for us is just live a good life, live all the stuff we've been living to get out. Keep it up. Don't stop. Because we stop living that life, we allow that cancer to start growing again. So, for me, yeah, there's been challenges, but it's been some of the greatest challenges of my life. Oh, and one other thing. And this is something I did for myself, and I've seen guys go the other way successfully. I've seen the other guys go the other way tragically. When you get out, spend the first 6 months, year, 2 years focusing on yourself. Don't worry about getting into a relationship. Don't worry about, having a romance and doing all this stuff. That'll come. But while you're in transitional housing, while you're trying to figure out how to live life out here as a person, how are we going to have a healthy relationship when we can't give 100%? So, I've chosen not to get into a relationship, to even pursue them. I mean, I've had a few dates and those were fun, but going in, it's like, yeah, I'm not seeking a relationship. I just want to go out, go dancing, have a good time, and have a friend. But I've seen guys go into chasing romantic relationships to tragedy right out the gate. Spend this first year focusing on yourself, because we're no good in a relationship if we don't know how to deal with ourselves. So that's pretty much my advice and my take on it. So
Fantastic. Loved all of that. Great to hear your experiences. And Dean, you have your own journey to share with us, and ideas, thoughts,
Yes.
strategies.
Yes, there are so many different moving pieces in getting out and staying out. There's not just one thing that you can focus on, but it starts when you're still inside. It starts with the transformation, the mindset, the change, the coping skills, the adaptability, the flexibility. It starts with parole plans. It starts with a relapse prevention plan. Parole plans are so important. They've got to be realistic. And I know you've had a section on that. A lot of times people do not know what they're stepping into when they step into parole. You've got to know what you're stepping into. How then can you make realistic parole plans if you don't know what you're doing? What it's going to be like, what conditions may be there. Some people have much more stringent conditions than other people. So it's good to have a ballpark idea of what you're stepping into. And then once you do, what I've noticed is that a lot of people, when they create the parole plans, is they don't put down time for themselves. They put down, I'm going to the DMV, I got to get my license, got to get Social Security, birth certificate, do all this, to go to the parole office, transitional, all this stuff. And it's like everybody wants to make up for lost time. So they're immediately doing everything. And then, from week one, what they're doing to week two to the first month, 3 months, 6 months. But what I never see is a portion where it just says, I'm going to kick back and I'm going to take time for me to enjoy my freedom. Let me just walk in the grass with no shoes on, watch the sunset, watch the sunrise. Let me just enjoy life. I don't see that very often. And that's hugely important. And what people don't realize, and this is because you don't know what you don't know. We know that there is a physical transition back into society. What people don't realize is there's also a mental and an emotional transition back into society. And, when Michael was talking about going to Macy's, being overwhelmed, that's part of what I'm talking about. This is all of a sudden you see all these things, there's people every which way, and it's very uncomfortable. So the thought of just being free, being able to walk through a door, to go where you want, all the things that you can do. And it's a lot to take in. I took a guy who paroled once, I took him to Walmart. He needed some underwear, t-shirts, and he stopped and he looked at this long, huge row of the same thing by all these different brands, and I actually watched him look at these things, not knowing what to pick, what to do, before he'd go up to a window and say, hey, give me double extra large, and they throw a pair of boxers out to you, so now he's got to select, and he goes, I don't know what to do. And I told him, I said, what brand did you wear when you were a kid? He said, I wore Fruit of the Loom. I said, right there. And he says, okay. And so he grabbed the Fruit of the Looms of what he needed. And so he got his stuff. Something so simple, going to a fast food restaurant. They have these kiosks now that you can order from. You're looking at the menus when, the menus are so confusing these days. It's like, what the heck am I looking at? The line's getting longer. You're confused. You're frustrated. The 16-year-old kids behind the register talking about, sir, you ready to order? Sir, you ready to order? You start panicking, getting frustrated. What do you do? So it's like, just step aside. Step aside, let the next person go. So there's so much that comes into just being overwhelmed with everything that takes place out here. And, the three things that stood out for myself when I came home was that, number one, people smoke out here, cigarette smoke. And that was just like, wow. Gas fumes from vehicles, because you're not around cars in there. So you're not around gas fumes. The third thing was that, and Mike, you might get a kick out of this, when you mail a letter, you have to seal it. Inside you just tuck the flap and drop it in the box. Out here, you got to seal the envelope, So these little things that you don't realize that are there, and they come up everywhere. Sometimes it's just, it can be challenging, but it's up to the person. And this is where coping skills come in. Coping skills are so very important to have. You had them in there and you're going to use them out here. I mean, try getting on the freeway. You want to talk about needing coping skills? Get on the freeway. So it's like I get on that freeway and, with all these mad drivers, it's just like, oh man, got to have coping skills. Life is challenging out here and it can be very hard. Mike, you touched on, the cost of living. When I came home, I applied for 32 different jobs, couldn't get a job. I came out educated with counseling credentials, all kinds of things, could not get a job. I ended up taking a job picking up trash on the freeway, laborious jobs for construction. I needed to do something to make ends meet. It took about a year before Lighthouse took off. And since then, I've been blessed and haven't had to look back. I've been, but that first year was very challenging. But even when Lighthouse has been doing well, there are times that are discouraging. There's times that, you go into elements of depression. There's times that, life is hard and you're trying to pay the bills. The cost of housing is up. The cost of food is up. The cost of gas is up. Am I making enough? I have employees to pay. I got to pay my rent. And that goes up 9% every year, thanks to, bills that they've passed. So there's a lot that goes into it. And when I can sit back and I can go, life was definitely easier on the inside. But I'll tell you what, my worst day out here is better than my best day in there. So it's one of those, like, let's get through it. So you use your coping skills. The stress is a huge issue, because stress leads people back to drugs, back to alcohol, back to gambling, back to committing offenses. They're trying to escape the stress. Now, what coping skills do you have in place to address that stress? A lot of people will say, well, I'll go out, I'll exercise, I'll meditate, I'll pray, I'll play some music. Okay, as soon as you get done with that, the stress is still there. You haven't addressed it. What you resist persists. You have to address the stress. How do you address the stress? Okay, so my bills are stacking up. I can't get a job. My parole agent's a jerk. I'm having a hard time moving forward. I'm stressed out. Let me address this. So it's real simple. There's a mental process. I look at what's real in the situation. I look at what I'm making up in the situation. I look at what I control in the situation. What don't I control in the situation? I apply consequential thinking. If I do this, this is going to happen. If I do that, that's going to happen. And then I make an informed decision. So this is what goes on in my mind as to what I'm going to do to address the situation. And this has helped me a lot to get through a lot of, areas where I felt like giving up at times, where life was just seeming to get to be too hard. Is this too hard for me? The world had changed. After 23 years, the world was not the place that I remembered it to be. So much had changed. Generations and their belief systems and all these different things. It was just a different place. And what I wanted was the world that I had left, that I had remembered. That's where I wanted to be. So, it's like going through these things. You've got to be flexible. You have to adapt. You have to have the self-awareness. Mikey touched on that. That self-awareness, the precursor to applying any coping skill, the first step is self-awareness. Understanding when your body's changing, your thoughts are changing, your feelings are changing, and then address that. That self-awareness plays a huge role, because you've got to be aware of what you're stepping into. Mikey talked about going past casinos, self-awareness. Know what the triggers are. A huge part to succeed, on top of that, having the coping skills and the self-awareness, is having goals. Set some goals. Parole in prison is a good place to reach a lot of goals, because there's less distractions. College, for example. You can go to college. I earned my associate's, bachelor's, and master's inside. I had goals. So I went ahead and I did that. Now, I came out on parole for 5 years. I do have one major regret while I was on parole. Parole, you have distractions, but it's still a good time to get things done, because you're still on parole. There's still places you can't go. You're still, you got to get permission to do this. You still have a certain level of being confined. It's a good time to just let me sit this down and focus. And my regret that I have was that I did not start my doctoral program while I was on parole. I waited. And had I would have less distractions, because now I'm not on parole. And now there's even more distractions, because now I can travel all over the place and don't have to get anybody's permission. I go to Houston, Oklahoma, been to Colorado, Nevada, been to all these different states. And a lot of it's work related. Sometimes it's not, but there's so many more distractions. Now, had I taken the time while I was on parole, I could have knocked out this doctorate. I could be done. I got about another year left. So it's being able to set the goals, to achieve the goals, to focus. The conditions of parole are not difficult. I have not seen a person. Well, let me rephrase. The only people that I've seen get violated on parole are people who have made the conscious decision to break the law or their conditions. I have never seen a parole agent say, I'm going to get this guy, go out and get him for nothing. I haven't seen it. It's people who don't follow the rules. For whatever reason, they're doing things they shouldn't. And I've seen a few. I know that lifers have the lowest recidivism rate. And I believe it's just over 1% now. It used to be under, but with all the lifers that have gotten out, that's gone up a little. But like Mike said, also they're programmers. Lifers are programmers. So it's like we can stick to a program and develop. But the thing of it is, once you're off parole, then what? Being, some conditions, somebody might have a 5B, meaning they're being tested for drugs or alcohol when they're on parole. And part of the condition for that is that you cannot go into a place that primarily sells or serves alcohol. But once you're off parole, then you can. There's a distractor. So do you start doing that? Do you fall back into old habits? So it's important while you're on parole, condition yourself out here, and it's once you're off parole to succeed and stay out, you want to have lived into that programming lifestyle. There's more things that you can do, but do it wisely. Make your decisions wisely. Think about what you're doing. Think about consequences. You know, out here in the world today, you can't do anything that's not going to show up on somebody's camera. Someone's going to be videoed somewhere. Think about your consequences. Think about your actions, because one wrong move, and because you have a record, you're the bad guy. You're the one they're going to come after. So think about that. But I think that just the staying out, being successful, setting the goals, do what you're supposed to do, be where you're supposed to be. And the agents aren't out to get you. I did have my very first agent when I first got out, and this guy, he was a big guy, probably about 6'2", probably about 260 pounds. He looked like he could play the dirty cop in a TV show. And he would tell me, he says, look, this is your programs, and if you don't show up, I'm going to violate you. If you're late, I'm going to violate you. If you miss, I'm going to. Everything was a threat of violence, and I was scared. I did not want to go back. I just got done 23 years. And it scared me. So I did everything. And my biggest fear, I had him for about 2 months. Now, in 5 years on parole, I had 16 agents, 16 different agents. Okay. That gets tricky because each agent is different, and you got to see what makes them tick and work with them, be able to understand what they're looking for. When I got my second agent, she came over and she says, "What's your biggest fear?" And I said that I'm going to get violated because not that I don't want to be where I'm supposed to be, but I don't know how to get there. And she says, "Well, let me introduce you to Google Maps." And she sat down for an hour with me and explained everything to me, and then the busing system, the train system. I'm not from Sacramento. That's where they put me. I'm from Orange County. I've never been to Sacramento in my life. I ended up in a home in Sacramento where I don't know anybody. And figure it out. After all all those years in prison, technology changes, all these different things. What do you do? So it's just, there comes the coping skills. And there was numerous times when I told myself, this is where I apply the coping skills. Being self-aware, because I felt the stress. I was in R&R waiting to be released. On the day of my release, when they came up and they said, "Well, the transitional house you were going to, you're not, you're going to another one." What? Now what do I do? Because my plans were for the one I was going to. Sit back, breathe. Okay, this is where I apply my coping skills. The important thing is you're going home. Doesn't matter where they put you, you're going home. Now, as lifers, as people who've been in prison, I believe that we are some of the most flexible and adaptive people, because we are put into situations where we still adapt and be flexible to survive, to succeed. So there's nothing out here they can't throw at me that I can't get through. Having that positive mindset, knowing that, okay, I cannot go back. I can't violate. That's not an option. I have to figure a way through this. I'm choosing to figure a way to get through this, and then living into that. But yes, I think, for me, that's a big part of what it's been. And now it's like I watch others go through it, and I see their challenges and the different things that they go through. And Lighthouse 9 Consulting, we do some aftercare. So where we'll meet with the guys, pick them up, help them out, take them out to eat. And if there's things that we can hook them up with, if it's counseling, then we do, so it's just understanding. And Michael's living through this. So he's learning the experience, the understanding of what it takes, what's there, what are the obstacles, how do I navigate this, and then to share that information with others, because that's going to help them succeed. And I think a big part of that is us being there for each other, to support each other, because others who haven't walked our path don't know what it's like. I know a lot of people are out, there's a lot of resources and people who want to help, but unless you've walked the path, you have no idea. So it's just, I think a big part of it is just helping each other, being there for one another. That's all I got, Elizabeth.
Wow, fantastic. So great. And I'm sure Joe really appreciates the feedback for his own book and stuff. I think that what I'm hearing from y'all is the grant of parole is not the finish line. It's really the starting point. And the strategy from Joe's point of view, I think this chapter is just a gentle admonishment and guide for staying conscious of the fact that staying out of prison after the parole grant is the most important thing. And I heard you guys speak about how, if you don't plan properly, if you've got any unresolved internal issues, and even lack of support, can be very challenging to a parolee. And so one of the things too is, I always say, being granted parole doesn't always equate to being ready for parole, because a lot of people, there are some people that can make a great presentation but be not ready. And I do think that you all have the advantage of having to be sort of forced to do the work before you get out. Unlike what Michael had said was, he sees the resentencing people just sort of getting an easy, well, there you go, you got resentenced, your life sentence is done, and you've got so much time, and you literally walk out the gate a month after sentencing, your resentencing hearing. And that's actually, like he said, not possibly detrimental. He has seen evidence that it is detrimental. And but complacency, one of the things I thought about was complacency. And I think complacency could be much like, kind of like high blood pressure, right? It's invisible unless you start testing. But if you don't know that you've got something going on, so if you lose your structure or momentum on parole, this could create a quiet unraveling of your sobriety, your whatever your sobriety is. So for Michael, it happens to be gambling. For somebody else, it could be alcohol and drugs. For somebody else, it could be a sex addiction. So somebody else could be gang activity, gang mentality, criminal thinking, you name it. We've all got our step one issues, the things that make our life powerless and unmanageable. And that's for everybody. And I think for everybody, it's the disease of being unfairly treated or emotional dependency, any of those things. One of the things I want to highlight, and I always highlight, is 12-step programming is one of the most effective ways to fight against complacency. It reinforces structure, honesty, service, daily engagement with recovery principles, and that support structure that Dean just mentioned. It's hard to reach out to a family member that's never been to prison or never drank alcohol or never had these issues that come up, these addictions that we identify in step one. So that's why I encourage all of my clients, the 12 steps. There's a 12-step for everything. And there's a 12-step group running every 15 minutes online, literally every 15 minutes. And another thing about 12-step meetings in the community, unlike being in prison or being to some structured meeting that your parole agent signs up for you, if you're late because you missed the bus, those people will welcome you in that meeting 5 minutes before the meeting stops. They also have a thing called coffee chat after, or something like this. Again, so that support structure is there. So there's really no excuse for not participating in that and staying vigilant about it. Joe can probably attest to this as well. When we get the reconsideration hearings where people, what happened? And then when you really start to unpack it, they got overconfident and they stopped going to the meetings. Everything was going great. I feel great. Everything's good. And it's really mostly those emotional triggers that will get you down versus the external triggers. Like Dean was saying, they pulled the rug out from me underneath me. I wasn't even out the gate yet, or I just was. And they said, oh, you're going to a completely different, not only county, but a completely different part of California, and good luck. And so, that was one thing, but Dean really had to tap into his internal strength and coping strategies to overcome that. So that's so important. And transitional housing, I think Joe might have mentioned in his book that it's good and necessary, but it's not real life and can provide a kind of artificial safety unless you use it to your advantage. So once you really move in with family, friends, or your wife or husband or whatever it is, that's when the true test of your relapse prevention plan is really going to be put to, to the test. And some are and may not be prepared for the overall emotional, financial, and relational challenges that are going to come. And as I've said before, too, proceed with caution. When you get married to someone in prison and you don't really know them, proceed with caution. I think Michael's position on it is shows an extremely advanced level of emotional maturity and intelligence. However, like I say always, now there are no accidents in God's world. So that will just be the other test for him when somebody just comes out of the blue, and that's what happens. And then that's probably when he'll be put to the test there. But a lot of things, I would say, moving straight from transitional housing into spouse's home is very risky. You've got codependency, emotional dependency, poor communication skills that haven't been worked on, everybody on their best behavior in prison and on the phones, unmet expectations, unenforceable rules of the wife or husband. These are just some of the few common pitfalls. I always encourage my clients to get your own place. I don't care if you're married or not, unless you were married before and it was, you were married before you went to prison. That might be a bit different. But like many of you mentioned, wow, 20 years later, 30 years later, the world's a different place, completely different place. And so that's challenging, especially now. I think about my clients coming out now, and they're going to be faced with AI, which is coming, and it's coming at a rapid pace. And so what are you going to do when some of those jobs are no longer available because AI is going to do them? You're going to have to adjust to that as well. And just again, it's like everybody said, make a plan, accept slow progress. And I like what Dean said too about get out and enjoy life. That's what I was saying. The client that I had that's recently released, and he's sharing his journey with me, the new job, I can see him. He's going to the beach. He's taking time with family. He's going to basketball games. He's saying, hey, I want to join the podcast, but let me get a job. Let me get settled. Let me spend some time on myself. I saw him touring around San Francisco and taking in the beauty of that city and that sort of thing. And also staying busy. Just staying busy is so important, I think, because in prison, in general, when you're working toward parole, you are kept very, very busy, and you don't really have time once you're deep into your recovery and your rehabilitation to screw up in prison because you're just on the move. There's no riot for you involved because you're over here in this group, and there's none of this coverings because you know all the rules. You're just so motivated all the time. And when you get out, I think there can be that go, oh no, now what? And there's that addiction to busyness. But I think it's very important that there's some idle hands or the God's something, not God's work, or I'm screwing up the expression, but volunteering, even if you can't find a job. Another fantastic idea is some people say, look, let me volunteer for you for 3 months while I'm in the transitional housing. Like Dean said, take advantage of parole. You could afford to say, you know what, company, you don't want to hire me? I'll work for you for free. Give me 3 months probation because you've got the transitional housing landing place for you to do that. Let me prove to you that I can be an asset to your company and do it that way. And if not, you can always volunteer and give back through your step 8 and step 9. And I think Joe ends the book by saying, the emotional truth of this strategy is the worst day of your life is not when you went to prison. It could be when you're back after you promised everyone you would never return. And so with that, why don't I just give everyone a chance, Joe, some last minute remarks, and everyone else a chance for any burning desires, and we'll wrap it up.
If I can give any closing remarks at all, and anybody who's watching can go back, listen to what Michael and Dean said, because they're the ones who are actually doing it, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And I mean, they made it so real. I can go over a summary of everything they said about obeying the conditions of parole, give time for yourself, be vigilant and self-aware. And if I couldn't add one thing to that, it's remember, where the mind goes, the body follows. And what you think is what you're going to do. So think right. And this being the last chapter, I think it's amazing to have the guests on that we do, because you guys make it so real. You're doing it, or you've done it. You continue to do it, and it's got to be really tough. And maybe it's not tough. I don't know. It is and it isn't. But you have an opportunity, and by following your game plan, and the plan set down for you by the state with the conditions of parole, and using the resources you have, you're making it happen, and you're coming out into the world and adjusting and moving on, and hopefully having a good life. Not an easy life, but a good life. Like Dean said, the worst day out here is better than the best day in there. So with that, I'll close.
Michael, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I really liked one thing that Dean did bring up. Take time for yourself, decompress, because, I had 26 years in prison, and before that, almost a year in county. And there's a lot of tension we build up in prison. There's a lot of tension we build up getting ready for board. Self-care is important, but, self-care isn't just about going in and doing your burpees all day long and all that stuff. Go out and enjoy the world. I mean, yeah, we may be broke coming out, may not have a whole lot of money, but the bus is cheap and the beach is free. Hiking is free. Do little things like that. Find things you enjoy. Go walk around the mall. Go see a movie. There's things you can do that are inexpensive or free. Take time to experience the world. I mean, for 26 years, my whole experience of the world was getting handcuffed, thrown in the back of the van, and going out to court or to the hospital and getting to see the world outside. Now I can do that without all the chains. And it means so much more. And it really helped me get rid of a lot of stress. In fact, it's one of my coping strategies. I go out, I'll go sit at the beach, take a walk, and it allows me to think through the problems and clear my head. And, by the time I do that, I usually see at least one or two solutions. And then I just approach it from new. But decompressing helps big time.
Dean, and then we'll wrap it up and say goodbye for today.
You know what? There's so many different areas that we hit on today. I could go on forever on a lot of these different areas, and I won't, because otherwise we're going to be here for a lot longer. I really look forward to getting into the next topic and seeing what's there. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to next.
And that's a great idea. We don't have to just do one chapter. If there is a chapter that we want to say that's really everybody's got additional things to say after it, and we make it into parts 2 and 3, it's totally acceptable. Because I know when it comes to relapse prevention planning and things like that, those are multiple shows. We've done lots of shows. Joe and I have done other shows before we got into his book on that as well. So I really appreciate all of you. Happy Father's Day for everyone involved here, including myself. Why not? It's California. So I will see you all next Sunday with chapter 1. It's a consensus. We love you, Joe. Good book.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye. Be good people.
Okay.